Mark has already given you a little bit of my background, but I thought I'd take a few slides just to give you a few highlights of what I've been doing, tell you a little bit about Netflix, and then I'm going to walk through some key trends as we see it from the Netflix perspective. And then I'm going to spend the bulk of this presentation talking about how we do product innovation at Netflix. So background, this is where I started, Christchurch. Spent a little bit of time at the University of Canterbury. Then I was at New Zealand Post doing pretty much marketing roles, really very little technology. Figured this whole internet thing was pretty interesting. Wanted to get out of the very marketing-focused roles into something a bit more technology-oriented. And I spent a year at iHug during that phase that iHug was really trying to go from being a nicely, quickly growing company that was not very well known within New Zealand or anywhere into a much better known, I guess still New Zealand-focused company. Made the move over to the US at the end of '99. Not the wisest time to head over there. Pretty much the end of the dot-com bubble. So a little bit of a struggle for a while. But from there I spent 7 years at Yahoo, running all kinds of products for Yahoo during perhaps one of its pretty successful phases. It's now maybe a little less so. And from there moved on to Netflix, where I spent the last 4 years. And Netflix is really the combination of the internet and movies, so it's a pretty sexy product, and it was too good an opportunity to pass up. So let me tell you a little bit about Netflix. Really what we're about is movie and TV entertainment made easy. That's the whole deal for us. So we deliver movies by DVD. This is kind of our historical business. Movies back and forth through DVD. Pretty much any movie you could want to watch is available on Netflix through a subscription program. And then we also stream a lot of movies, and this has really been the growth area for us and where I'll spend most of the time talking today. We stream movies to TV screens and to any number of different devices, and I'll go into that in a little more detail. DVDs by mail, 50 distribution centers throughout the US. Pretty much every DVD goes out, comes back within a day, 97% one day, and that's really a function of geography more than it's a function of DVDs or our logistics. And we ship 2.5 million DVDs a day, 56,000 unique titles. So it just gives you a little bit of a sense of the scale there. On the streaming side, the way this works is that anything that gets the internet and produces a picture is a great candidate to work with Netflix. So we've been striving to get every single device you can think of streaming Netflix. The only real outlier is the BlackBerry. And you probably heard a little bit about why that was earlier today from other presenters. So we were, until last year, live in just one country, which is the US. Then we launched in Canada, and now we're live throughout all of the Americas, 45 countries. I couldn't name all of them. Brazil and Argentina, the big ones, and the rest. 25 million members. So that's most of that growth, again, has come from the streaming side. Pretty big number, and one of the biggest subscription services out there. We're in the sort of same tier, I suppose, as many other premium video providers, the HBOs and the like in the US. 25 million is a big number when you think about it relative to New Zealand, but when you think about it relative to Facebook and some of those other big internet services, not that huge. This is a little bit of a side note, but I thought I would spend a moment on it. We have a little bit of a unique culture at Netflix, and it's all about freedom and responsibility. Our whole focus is to hire really smart people and then just let them do their jobs, which means we have a minimum of controls, a minimum of process, a minimum of getting in the way of smart people doing their jobs. Not core to what I'm talking about today. It's really a different presentation, but it's interesting stuff, and I'd love to dig into it later with Q&A or perhaps over a beer. Here's a couple of quotes from folks within the industry just validating the value of this approach. Excuse me. Okay, so I'm going to dig into some key internet trends. These will be things you've probably heard a little bit about already today. I'm going to take a focus from the Netflix perspective, so a little bit of a different approach. And then it's the end of the day and we're all a little bit tired, so we'll keep it reasonably lightweight. Pictures instead of intense data. So the first one is broadband prevalence, which has really been the key to Netflix's growth. And if you look back to the internet in around February of 2005 at Yahoo, where I was working at that time, it looked something like this. Very text heavy, not very graphics heavy, certainly not much in the way of video. But something else happened in February of 2005 as well. Does anyone happen to know? So YouTube launched in February of 2005. And at that time, video looked kind of like this. And I don't mean the stupid dance, I mean the size of the video, the quality of the video. It was really postage stamp quality, very low resolution. You couldn't consume video over the internet in any meaningful, compelling way. But by now, we've seen massive broadband connectivity, and just a few highlights of different parts of the world. This is the connectivity rate per household. So you can see in some cases it's greater than 100%, which reflects the fact that there are more than one broadband connection to a given household. The rate of growth around broadband connectivity has just been huge. Another view of that same data. And when you look at what's happened as broadband connectivity has grown so rapidly, you see that video has emerged as a huge part of what's consuming all of that data. Video being about half now of the proportion of US internet traffic. Very US-centric, but the general pattern is similar. And meanwhile, the web has declined, or at least as a percentage, while it's grown overall. And peer-to-peer, which you would think of as piracy, is also a little smaller. So what that enables is video that doesn't look like the little postage stamp we looked at a few minutes ago, but looks like this. This is a screenshot from my laptop. It doesn't look quite so good on these screens, but what you're pretty much looking at is 720p video streaming to your TV, to your computer, whatever, over the internet, through Netflix. And that leads to this, which is something that's an interesting sort of a stat and gives you a sense of the scale of both internet video and of Netflix. This is a chart showing the portion of total downstream internet traffic in the US and indicating that Netflix accounts for about a third of that. So pretty much we're a third of data sent into households at peak traffic times, a ridiculously large number. And it's a reflection of the massive amount of streaming that happens through Netflix, as well as just the quality of that video that we're streaming. And it's interesting to look at it in the context of other services. So we're bigger than YouTube and BitTorrent combined. I mean, the exciting thing about that, when we passed the BitTorrent threshold, the exciting thing for our partners and in general is we're bigger than piracy. It's good. If we look forward, so that the trend as we look forward here is really the growth of broadband and then continuing growth. And if we look at 2012 specifically with this data, we see that internet video traffic is expected to reach half of all consumer internet traffic, pretty consistent with that earlier slide, and just an indication again of as broadband speeds accelerate and as people get faster connections into the home, it's really all about video. Better quality video, more video, multiple simultaneous video streams, HD monitoring within the home, you name it. But video is the bandwidth hog. Second trend is really around internet on devices, and I think we heard a number of different opinions around this one earlier today and at lunchtime. So I'll take sort of a simple view of it, and not news to any of you, but until recently, most internet consumption really happened on these kinds of devices, on desktop computers and on laptops. And now we see, of course, the phone being a huge source of internet consumption. We see tablets out of nowhere being really a big deal, and we see a lot of consumption on devices. All three of these have been classes of devices that have been very key for Netflix growth. And just a couple of charts, maybe different views on this data that are interesting to look at. And this one shows the portion of just the mobile phone install base. And the interesting thing about this one is the rate of acceleration of Android. So Android out of nowhere has quite quickly become actually the primary smartphone device. But the interesting thing is you look at that chart in the context of all phones, and this is US-centric data again, but when you look at smartphones as a portion of all phones, the interesting thing is how small they actually are. So the big blue section on the top of this chart, if it's a little hard to read, shows all non-smartphones relative to all smartphones, and just indicates the amount of growth potential there still is around smartphones and around all of the internet connectivity that will come with those phones. Another chart on that same theme of tablets or of internet connectivity and devices in general, this one shows the ridiculous rate at which the tablet has been adopted. And each of these lines shows, as a function of launch date, the number of iPads, iPhones, and iPods in people's hands. And you can just see that the iPad has been off the charts. It's huge. Tablets everywhere. Kevin asked me to spend a moment talking about the Kindle Fire because it's sort of recent and relevant. So I'll do that. I'll spend a moment sort of giving you some thoughts on that. The Kindle Fire is interesting in one particular way, which is that it's priced at below the cost of production. So I think it's $200, and it costs Amazon a little bit more than $200 to actually produce that device. So it's a very different strategy to the one that Apple would employ. And the reason they're doing that is they want to get devices into people's hands so that those people can consume media, and Amazon can be the ones to fulfill that media to make all of their money out of selling different kinds of media that can be consumed on that device. So I would characterize it as not being a brilliant device. If you've actually used one, it's not incredible from a technology perspective. It's a little bit slow, it's a little bit clunky, it doesn't have that sexy feel of an iPad, but it's a brilliant move by Amazon. Think of it as selling nuts. Think of it as giving away nuts in the bar so you can sell more beer. It's a little bit analogous to that. This is my gratuitous self-promotion slide. So we'll just move on. On the connected TV side, a little bit of data just indicating the volume of TVs finding their way into households over the next few years. And it's something that's not a huge deal right now, but it's becoming more and more significant. And we've seen this within Netflix in the sense that when we started growing our streaming business, getting to devices that were already in homes was key to our rapid growth. So you have a PlayStation, it's already connected, it streams, we're away. But we've seen the rate at which people are using those TVs, the new TVs that they're purchasing, just growing at a steady, consistent rate. And the predictions are that 500 million will be in homes by 2015. And this will be very much about video consumption, but also a lot of social images and other sorts of lightweight, entertainment-focused content. So again, the trend here is that anything that can pull down the internet and produce some sort of a picture is a great candidate for being an internet-connected device. And the laptop and the desktop, in my opinion, become relegated to hardcore working devices. When you need to sit down and build a spreadsheet, great. For anything else, probably not so much. The third trend to talk about is just the move toward more natural interactions. And it's really consistent with those devices we just talked about. So think of this as the accelerating shift from old interaction models, like the keyboard, the game controller, and the mouse, to something new and easy, like the iPad. And last time I came to New Zealand was right after the iPad launched. I flew down here with my 1-year-old daughter, and then I visited my 88-year-old grandmother. And it was striking to me that we cracked out the iPad, we saved it for the flight, got to have something for the end of the flight. And it was amazing how quickly my 1-year-old could work this thing, and how comfortably my 88-year-old grandmother, or how happily she would engage with it, use it, swipe with it, look at pictures, just generally engage with it. It's quite remarkable how the old modes of interacting with computers are replaced by these far more natural, far more intuitive modes. And this is a great example. Other examples are movement. This is one of my designers working the Xbox with nothing more than his hand. So he's using his hand to shuffle through movies, to move movies up and down, and then he'll point to something he wants to watch, play will click up, and he'll do something else with his hand, and away he goes. Very Minority Report-like. It's a little bit of a novelty, I think, but the trend toward movement and the ability to recognize movement in this way and use it as a mode for interacting with computers is obviously pretty substantial. You would rightly guess that this would be mostly about gameplay, at least initially, but the fact that we're building it into a Netflix UI is interesting to me. The last one is sound. And if anyone has an iPhone 4S and has played with Siri, it's just quite remarkable how effectively that thing will recognize what you're saying and will do something with it. And another example I've included here, again from Netflix and again from the Xbox, is voice-activated Xbox. So I can be sitting in my living room and I can basically yell at the screen and it will do what I want it to do. Stop, pause, fast forward faster, stop, go back, whatever. Again, a little bit novelty, but it's interesting, new technology emerging, and it's very clear that these modes of interaction will replace keyboard, mouse, and all of that hard stuff that took many of us many years to get comfortable with. I think I just said all of this. I'm going to take a drink. So the last one I'll talk about is social. And not social in general, because we've all heard so much about that, but more specifically the open graph. But first we'll look at a few Facebook stats just because it's fun. So this is just an indication of the ridiculous rate at which Facebook has consumed all time spent online. And you can look at charts like this, or you can do the thing that I often do, which is look around in any cafe or any coffee shop at all the people on computers and try to find the one that's not on Facebook. It's kind of hard to find. I don't know, it's remarkable the rate at which it's displaced many other modes of really interacting with computers. A few other stats, just the volume of users, the rate at which people are engaging, the number of people using on mobile phones, and then the rate at which Facebook has managed to get to global with a full 80 languages, one of course being Pirate English. This stat just blew my mind. 4% of all photos ever taken are hosted on Facebook. 4% of all photos. Think back the history of photography, all the different modes of sharing photography, Flickr and all of the other online modes. Facebook has already managed to gobble up 4% of that. And it's interesting because photos are such an inherently social thing that it's logical that this would happen. But that's not what I really wanted to talk about. What I wanted to talk about is connecting activity. So if you listen to Facebook and the way they've been thinking about their business over the last 5 years, and how they're thinking about it over the next 5 years, they'll say the last 5 years were about connecting people, having people find the people from their past, from their present, creating those relationships on Facebook and enabling the sharing activity that would happen. The next 5 years are really about connecting activity, and more specifically about frictionless sharing. So the idea here is that whatever I'm doing, wherever I am, however I'm engaging with products, is automatically a part of what I'm sharing. There are a couple of companies, Netflix being one of them, that are deeply engaged with this. So I'll walk you through what it means and how I think about it. The first step around this is to get people connecting apps. So we've all connected with our friends and with our families and whatever. The idea here is to get people connecting apps. And we at Netflix have been trying various ways to do this, to gently encourage people to connect and automatically share their activity. If you're Spotify, a music service that some of you may have heard of, a recent and rapidly growing music service, you've taken a much more aggressive approach, forcing automatic sharing of activity. So when you sign up for Spotify, you have to use Facebook, and you will share the music that you watch. And they do that for some important reasons that I'll get into in a moment. So what happens then is that the sharing is automatic. I sign up for Spotify or I connect my account on Netflix, and whatever I do there becomes something that my friends are consuming. It sounds interesting, it sort of sounds good. I put this in as an example of when I connected my account during our trial phase internally, and I really saw it work in an interesting way. So I live in California in Silicon Valley. Nobody in Silicon Valley cares about Eric Bana or his XB Falcon Coupe. There's nothing I can do in promoting content on Facebook to get someone to care about this. But I watch it, and it shows up on my Facebook feed, and people in my office are watching this movie, just because of the power of the social recommendation over anything we can do through data. I included this one because it brought it home a little bit. Some other examples. This is just culled from my Facebook feed over the last couple of days. A friend watching music, I might decide to check out this music, it looks kind of interesting. A colleague watching another Netflix show, something perhaps I didn't hear about, something I'd like to watch. And then news. I'm a little bit dubious on news because it's more time sensitive. But the general trend is, as you engage and use applications online, that activity is automatically shared. You might ask, why here? The reason is to drive real-time serendipity. The sharing becomes automatic. The graph, your social graph, evolves. I think at this point it's a little bit still of a spammy update or a set of spammy updates, but it turns into an incredibly powerful set of social recommendations. Incredibly powerful for content discovery and for product discovery. So companies like Spotify and like Netflix and like Yahoo and many others are looking to take advantage of that by getting that information out there, by leveraging the fact that, as we've observed in many surveys that we've conducted, the best source of input on movies to watch or on products to check out or anything else is your friends. And if your friends can automatically endorse a product through their activity on Facebook, then that's pretty powerful. Many will say there are privacy concerns around that. I think privacy is a little bit of a blip that will tend to naturally find its place and will not be a substantial inhibitor to this type of sharing. So those are the trends that I wanted to touch on. There are many other trends we could talk about. These are the ones that are closer to what I do, to my business, and to my products, so they're things I can talk to with some authority.